All right. So about, I don't know, 24 hours or less ago, Dana White decided to drop a whole bunch of bombshells. And this is actually nothing new. He actually typically does this kind of thing around February of pretty much every year, at least the past few years, where he'll announce all of the interesting things that are going to go on in the world of combat sports over the next few months. He did this a couple years ago where he dropped a bunch of big news. It was Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman and a bunch of other things, but most notably, it was Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, which is kind of funny now because this was announced I think exactly 2 or maybe 3 years ago on this exact same week or so period of time, and it never happened. And back then, everyone was mad that Dana kind of just announced it with this like video of him talking instead of some insane promo. Well, this time, Dana decided to come back and make it even more underwhelming by announcing this on, I think it's Instagram Live. And this announcement was pretty insane. I mean, it was almost all of the news that MMA fans have been waiting for. One of the first big pieces of news was that the long rumored fight between Alex Volkanovski and Diego Lopez is no longer a rumor. It's actually a reality. And it's going to be for the UFC Featherweight World Championship, not just for the belt, because previously we thought it was going to be for the belt, but probably the interim belt. It's actually going to be for the undisputed belt. It's pretty much as out of nowhere as it gets because if these two are fighting for the undisputed belt at 145, that can only mean one thing. And it's that Ilia Topuria is in fact actually going up to 155. He said this previously on, I think, a number of different shows and podcasts. Nobody believed him for obvious reasons. I mean, if you were the guy already in the GOAT conversation at 145, probably only, a couple more title defenses away from realistically probably being the undisputed GOAT at 145. For him to just up and vacate the belt is absurd, but he is doing exactly that. And this is one of those situations where there's just so much to say. I mean, first of all, Diego Lopez getting a title shot less than 2 years after losing to Mosvar, who is still undefeated and is not fighting for the belt because, the guy's not exactly the most exciting fighter you'd ever want to see. And Diego Lopez now being a fan favorite, I mean, it makes sense business-wise for sure. And then for Topuria, apparently he was having some significant problems making 145 and just didn't want to do it anymore, just didn't want to cut the weight. And he's at a point now where he's so much of a star that I get it. I understand. He's already knocked out Max Holloway. He's already knocked out Alex Volkanovski. And those are the two guys that have beaten Jose Aldo. So I don't think him beating Diego Lopez does all that much for his legacy. I think he's already looked at as the brightest up-becoming, I feel like I shouldn't even say up-becoming, but the number one guy who is positioned to be the next face of the UFC, or at the very least, European MMA. But then that brings in a whole nother question, because since he vacated the 145-pound belt and he is going up to 155, the presumption is that he's going to be fighting Islam Makhachev. But if he wins that fight, first of all, if that fight even happens and he wins, he will not be a double champ. So it is kind of confusing. I feel like they could have just made the Volk versus Lopez fight for the interim to give Ilia Topuria the opportunity to be a double champ. But that kind of makes me think his first fight at 155 might not be for the belt. Let's not forget, not that long ago, Islam Makhachev fought and beat Alex Volkanovski twice already. So if I'm Islam Makhachev, I'm kind of thinking about this like, is it really worth it? Obviously, it'll be a big fight, a big money fight, but I always get the feeling that a lot of these Dagestani guys fight for legacy more than anything. Obviously, they want enough money to take care of themselves and their family for, years to come, but there's always going to be this asterisk if he gets by Topuria that 3 of his title defenses would have been against guys who were dominant in a weight class below. And then that makes me think about guys like Dustin Poirier, who's already been vocal about the fact that he has only a couple fights left. Topuria against Poirier is a big fight for the fans. It's the kind of fight that doesn't really need a belt attached. And I feel like if Ilia is able to knock out Dustin the same way he's been able to do to Holloway, the same way he's been able to do to Volkanovski, I could see the fans shifting, accepting Topuria as a real threat at 155, and then Islam Makhachev, if he's not already open to it, being open to taking that fight. But it does make me wonder, I mean, the comparisons have been drawn left and right between Ilia Topuria and Conor McGregor, who was another guy who was a dominant fighter, knocking everyone out at 145, and then once he went up to 55, he had the phenomenal performance against Eddie Alvarez, but after that was not able to get another win at 55. Because at the end of the day, weight classes do in fact matter, especially against the Dagestanis. And that's not all. I mean, the news just gets crazier and crazier. I don't even think I'll be able to cover everything in this video just because it's just so much. But Patricio Pitbull is actually now finally officially a UFC fighter, and he's jumping right into the deep end. The guy's, I believe he's 37. So he kind of has no choice but to hop into the deep end. He's taking a fight against Yair Rodriguez in the upcoming UFC in Miami. And right off the bat, just stylistically, I think it's a very real chance that Patricio goes up against someone with a very strange, very unique style in Yair Rodriguez and very likely gets knocked out. I mean, who knows? Maybe he surprises me, but this is a tough matchup to say the least, especially for your first fight in the UFC. But if I'm Patricio Pitbull, it probably doesn't matter because he's going to get not only paid very handsomely for this fight, but there is another fight, another huge fight waiting for him. Even if he were to lose this one, which would be against none other than Michael Chandler, a rematch, already has some heat on it. Two guys coming from Bellator, two guys that are up there in age. And it's a fight that a lot of fans would be very interested in seeing. And then, oh, by the way, speaking of Michael Chandler has himself an opponent. Now, obviously, he was waiting a very long time for that Conor McGregor fight. And you know what? I guess he kind of sort of got the next best thing. I'm sure some people have already made the jokes, whether it's for this fight or in the past. He's looking for Conor McGregor, but we have Conor McGregor at home. Another loudmouth 155er from a similar part of the world, and a guy with a lot of hype behind him in Paddy Pimblett, which I think this is actually a great fight. Michael Chandler coming off of a loss, it makes all the sense in the world for him to fight someone down in the rankings, but again, Chandler being a consummate company man, you got to give him a fight that's going to make him excited and a fight that's going to make the fans excited. And I think the Paddy fight is perfect. This is a matchup where we'll finally find out if Paddy is legit, if he's able to get the job done and potentially get the finish against someone like Michael Chandler. And Paddy Pimblett, famous for saying that Scousers don't get knocked out. Well, if there's one guy in this division that's going to try his heart out to test that theory, it's going to be Iron Michael Chandler. A win here for Michael Chandler positions himself beautifully going forward because it solidifies his position in the rankings as still a top 10, borderline top 5 guy who might walk away from this into a fight against Dustin Poirier, which in all reality, the way 155 is looking could be a number 1 contender fight. And of course, for Paddy Pimblett, he's fighting someone who's a little bit up there in age, probably starting to decline physically at least a little bit. I mean, not visually, at least not yet, but it's bound to happen eventually. And if Paddy's able to get this one done, Michael Chandler is one hell of a name to have on his resume. Now, there is a lot more to talk about out of all the things that were announced. I think the entire Miami card has been released, and that card from top to bottom is pretty stacked. There's also some big news in the 170-pound division. Leon Edwards will now be fighting Sean Brady instead of Jack Della Maddalena because Jack is now fighting for the belt against Bilal Muhammad instead of Shavkat. Shavkat just can't get a break. And in the wake of that, we get yet another increasingly common Bilal W on Twitter saying that he stole Leon Edwards' belt and his opponent. So that's pretty much it for now. Dana likes to do these things in batches, so I'm sure by the time that spring rolls around, he'll do something very similar and just out of nowhere drop some crazy bombshells for the summer into the fall. And hopefully soon we'll get some news on who Ilia Topuria is going to fight, because no matter who it is, it's going to be an insane fight. But as of right now, it's looking like it's very likely to be Islam Makhachev, and that would be an unbelievable fight. So let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think about all of this insanity? Who do you think Ilia Topuria should fight next? And who do you guys have winning any of these matchups that we talked about up to this point? Because I think they're all really interesting fights. Thanks for watching.